I'm extremely overwhelmed.
I try to calm that down, usually.
Peanut butter.
Men's a cappella.
Love it. You gotta have change, and otherwise it's just boring.
Where the real exciting stuff happens, where you can get down and dirty and really stir things up.
Sounds fun.
Okay, guys. Hey, everybody, can you please... No, hey, horns, I need you... Can you please stop... Hey, no, can you stop with that to the basses? I need you to be quiet. Timpani, please, hold on. I'm sorry, everyone, hold on. Okay, shh, all right, hey, quiet in 3, 2, 1... Okay, thank you. Sorry. Hi. Welcome to Emotion and Sound, brought to you by the Elephant Collective. I'm Adam Baird, and today, shush, we're talking about chaos. Well, we're all riding along on the chaos today, and it's going to be a very fun journey. I'm excited about that. For an engineering perspective, we're talking to Max Nordby because he's here and he's awesome.
I'm here every day.
Yeah, so thank you for doing that. Max, chaos in the studio. I mean, sometimes it feels like the whole studio is just chaos. Just existing in a studio is a chaotic event.
Everything.
What is that like, just in the day-to-day? Harnessing the crazy explosive nature of music and putting into something that's really ordered and specific and intentional and beautiful. How do you do that?
Yeah, turning chaos into beauty. That's a song right there almost.
Yeah, and it's your daily life.
It's my daily life. So there's a couple ways to look at it. One, there's the chaos of the gear.
Oh, man.
Something's always going to go wrong.
Yeah.
One piece of gear is always just like not going to work that day.
There's going to be a weird click, a tiny pop.
There's going to be a buzz.
Funny hiss.
Yep. And that's all just about troubleshooting.
Mm-hmm.
If you can troubleshoot in a studio, you're leaps and bounds ahead of everybody else.
How do you avoid getting frustrated by that? Because that seems like that process could be really stressful.
Yeah, but there is a process. Start at the source. Go to the guitar if you're recording a guitar.
Mm-hmm.
Is the guitar buzzing?
Mm-hmm.
No. Okay. Microphone. Try switching out the microphone. Okay. If that's still not working, try checking the cable. If that's not working, try the preamp.
So again, just being really systemic and organized about the way that you diagnose the problem.
Exactly.
To find this annoying little blip, this thing that's happening somewhere, you got to be really level-headed, right? You can't just try a bunch of things because then it's not a controlled environment.
No, and you have to work quick in the studio too, because if you don't, it's going to get more chaotic, and people are going to be like, "Why are you wasting my time? Why are you wasting my money?"
Yep.
If it's 5 to 10 minutes under, no problems.
Which is why you need an executable, quick plan for it, right? Something unexpected is always going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So having a game plan for addressing those things, that's critical. Well, you don't want to stress out the artist.
Yeah, because then you get stressed out because you're like, I'm trying to find it. When people are under stress, they miss things.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're going to miss it, or you're going to just be like, okay, well, it doesn't matter. It's fine. But it's not fine.
It's not fine. No, you have to take care of it, right? You're there to harness a very specific kind of chaos, like musical chaos. Yeah, all the sound waves rushing out of these instruments and colliding in all these crazy ways. But in order to capture that, you got to be really regimented.
Yes, absolutely. And it works with like musicians too. Like, how do you organize musicians?
Mm-hmm.
That's your job as an engineer, is to keep it going. Don't stop. Stop when you need to stop. Stop when the artists need a break.
Sure.
But your job isn't to just sit around for 5 minutes, be like, okay, well, they're just out there in the live room waiting for me.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to keep it going.
So how do you manage it if a band comes in and they're just kind of all over the place? Chaotic in not necessarily a good way, where maybe they're just underprepared or underorganized or something. What are some steps you can take to help them along without making them feel bad? Because they're here, right? They're here.
So that's a good question. Basically, what I would say is it's the same thing. Keep it going. Set up the microphones, get what you can done, and be like, wow, you guys, great take. I think we can do it better. Try X. Like, let's try it to a click now. It's always about experimenting too.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not trying something new to help them, then it's going to be chaotic the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. Honestly, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed by the chaos right now. Look, let's just keep shaking things up. Let's just keep running with it. We've got Kate Schutt here in the studio to talk about chaos as it applies to the life of a musician. Can you do this next interview, please? I gotta go decompress. Yeah, okay, cool. Thanks, man.
Tell me a little bit about like how chaos is kind of harnessed,
Yeah.
and or not harnessed within touring as well.
For sure. Well, I mean, just the story that in a couple of hours I'm going to be playing at a place I have no clue. I don't know the person
Right.
whose house it is. I don't know how many people are going to be there. I know a bit about what I'm going to play,
Mhm.
but I'll definitely wait and see, the age of the audience. And maybe the word is chance
Mhm.
for me. I mean, there's chaos for sure in the realm of it's snowing in Colorado today. Like, am I
Right.
going to be able to get there?
Right.
Like, not too sure about that. And there's always an element of uncertainty.
Mm.
Um,
Absolutely.
And again, that I love that. That to me is really part of the spiritual aspect
Mm.
of music
Mhm.
for me. And learning to embrace that chaos or that change or that uncertainty or that element of chance
Right.
as I don't want to sound like super pretentious, but
Go ahead.
but to me as an element of there's an element of spiritual practice in it,
Yeah.
involved in it. And I think
Absolutely.
maybe practice
I
is
would
the best
100%
way.
agree with that.
Yeah.
There's something about it that's it's meditative in one aspect when you're playing, maybe practicing on your
Mhm.
own, and also something beyond yourself when you're doing the show, right?
Right.
You're talking about that connection that normally you wouldn't have with a person, but when you get to play music, you kind of like let yourself go,
Mhm.
and they feel like they get to let themselves go as well.
For sure.
So there's definitely something beyond
Yeah, beyond is a
that
good
we
word.
don't really know.
Yeah.
So definitely spiritual. Music is definitely spiritual.
Yeah, and I think also that element of being okay. I mean, if you're talking about chaos, right? Like being okay no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as a touring musician, that's sort of the name of the game.
The name of the game is chaos. It's always changing, but it's always called the same thing, isn't it? I don't know what I talk about in Theory for 30, so I don't know how to transition to it. Welcome back to Theory for 30 with Adam Baird. That's me. So, if you like theory, this is going to be fun. And if you don't like theory, it'll be over soon. This is an A sus2 chord. It's one of my favorites, and one of the ways I really like to use it is by adding the third and then moving to a minor third with it, because it's sort of androgynous if you don't do that. So we've got no third. Here's my C sharp in the bass. Here's my C. Back to A sus2. This has been Theory for 30 with Adam Baird. Oh man, sus chords are chaotic. They're like chaotic neutral. For any of you D&D players, that's exactly what a sus chord is. If you don't know what that means, just ignore me entirely. Hey, let's talk to Evan Reeves, because Evan is pretty interesting in that he's a producer, he's a songwriter, he's a studio owner. He does all of these things, but the reason he's an expert in chaos is because he's a parent. Evan, how do you transition from being a parent to being an engineer? What headspace-wise, what's that like for you?
I'd probably say I'll talk more about production with that. Producing, working with artists is an interesting thing, right? Mm-hmm. It's you're working with people who have egos, who are vulnerable but don't act vulnerable, or not vulnerable at all, but easy to work with or hard to work with. You can never tell. But in college, I majored in psychology, which has been marginally or remotely useful in the studio. Not particularly. I mean, maybe if you want to study abnormal behavior, or something like that. But what has been incredibly useful in transitioning, it's the parent to producer transition or just life or whatever, but is I used to teach preschool. That has been by far the most valuable thing I could have ever taken to coming into a studio and producing artists.
Really?
So I'll let you think about that for a second. Wow. But it has been absolutely 100% effective. When you're dealing with a preschooler who's having a temper tantrum or a bad day or just being irrational or just having a problem and just needs to get talked out of something, when you have a young kid, it could be elementary school age, preschool, whatever, you have to really kind of get down to their level and engage them and really find out what's wrong and like, what can we do to make this better? What's really going on here? And you can't avoid it. When you're working with young kids, it's just, it's on. You can't walk away from it. And so I found that to be really useful working with artists. And I'm not calling them preschoolers, but then I'm actually calling them preschoolers. So you're talking with not big egos, but you're talking about such vulnerability and such creative spirit that you're dealing with either something totally irrational or something that's so highly rational that you can't fathom it. And either way, you got to kind of find the middle.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's easy to see the comparison to a child comparing an artist to a child can be seen as demeaning, but it really isn't, because children are wonderful and exciting and imaginative and beautiful balls of energy, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that necessitates volatility, right? So artists, hopefully, we've just never grown up, right? And that comes with all kinds of wonderful.
Would agree with that.
Yeah. Well, and that means that sometimes we're moody. Sometimes we're really just having a hard time today because for some reason I just don't like the way my strings sound, and I'm going to be really mad about that for the next 6 hours.
Sometimes we're leaning into a personal drama just because it makes us more creative, right?
Yeah.
I think if an artist has the ability to sink back into a childhood state, then they're probably a high-level artist.
Wow. So really, in terms of transition, it's about trying to get back to that point before we've transitioned into the real world.
Yeah, it's that, like when you see a child look out a window from a high rise for the first time and their just mind is blown. It's getting back there. As adults, we've seen it, so now we have to use drugs to get us back into that state of just wow. But if you don't have to do that, that's better.
It really is better. There's something about the state of chaos that really induces that wow. So let's talk about the wow a little more. We have in the studio with us here, Dango was a touring member of Elephant Revival for a decade, coming up during the time in which cell phones were really coming on the scene, social media was becoming a huge thing for bands. Basically, the entire music industry changed during his experience as a road warrior. So let's talk to him about that, because that sounds awesome. Dango, that transition in the last, say, decade, the industry has had a really hard but exciting time figuring out what to do. It feels like it's just this chaotic whirlwind. What was that like coming up, playing in a band, touring around through this really capricious time?
Yeah, it's interesting. When I started, we didn't have Google Maps or anything. I was the only one with a phone, and it was a Panasonic. So we were still using road atlases, And so I was on the tail end of that. And a lot of my friends were in that era too.
Sure.
It's not that long ago. We're just talking about the 90s, the late 90s into the early 2000s. And then from there, we were right before MySpace. Like we actually started getting together right before social media. So the roots of Elephant Revival go back to like 2003. But then, so we were just developing social media at that time. So we were a crossover generation of a band. And we were also a crossover generation, being right between, I guess, Gen X and millennials.
Yeah.
So we were in that sort of gray area that some people call the Oregon Trail generation. So we
That's awesome. I haven't heard that.
So it wasn't until I was in college till it was just different. It was different. There were still elements of older paradigms.
Yeah. Well, and that was probably exciting. When something like MySpace comes around, you say, wow, this is a totally different thing. How are people using this? How is this going to affect my music? And then you've got Facebook. And then you've got Napster mixed in there somewhere, which is raising some real questions. It must have just felt like there was always something new happening, and it was simultaneously very exciting as well as totally disorienting.
Right. And we were still doing it in such a grassroots way too, where we were, going town to town, making sure posters were up. And then the whole monetization or promotional capabilities of the social media platforms wasn't quite formed yet.
Right.
So there was a benefit to that as well, because the algorithms didn't smash us.
No, it was free media.
Yeah,
right.
So for a little while it was free media, and that was helpful. But we didn't even know that was necessarily as helpful as it was.
Right.
But it was helpful. But most of everything we did was just by going out and playing shows.
And was that a solace to you? I mean, just when everything's kind of swirling around, there's this new thing, there's this cool thing. Look, I can pull up a map on my phone now. It seems obvious to us now, but that can be overwhelming. But knowing that really, at the end of the day, you just need to get up on stage and play music. Was that centering?
Absolutely, because everything else you do in the day points to that. Like, that is what you're doing. And there's a firm focus. Everything else sort of just gravitates towards that. So you have a mission. And I think that mission is important. And many of us have that in different areas of life, but also many of us are missing that at times. And that could be challenging, going from like military life to domestic life.
Sure.
I think there's actually some similarities, the mental makeup and psychology for touring musicians, for going from tour life to domestic life.
Yeah, you're executing against a very specific set of orders. You know what you're supposed to be doing. There's a regimented routine, and there's a rigid expectation.
There is. You wake up with a day sheet. I mean, you wake up, you look somewhere on the bus, like on the mirror or by the door, and there is a day sheet, and then you fill in the gaps. And that was actually really comforting.
Sure.
So just getting on the bus was always like a release or a relief. It almost became like going home. So it was easier to get on the bus than it was to try to put the pieces together of my daily life on a domestic front.
Oh, that domestic front. Man, that'll get you. Now, listener, I want you to remember you need to make sure you move your clothes from the washer to the dryer. If you haven't done that, I just didn't want you to forget about that. And I also don't want you to forget to like, favorite, share, subscribe, all of those crazy, weird social media things that we now have to do because it's hygienic, it's domestic, it's how we facilitate our lives moving forward. So make sure you subscribe to Emotion in Sound, brought to you by the Elephant Collective, just for your own mental sanity and structure as a way to fight against the chaos and inevitable entropy of life. We can hold on to just a little meaning before all that goes away. So, listener, if you like the emotions and the sounds that are coming to your ears, the best way to make sure that keeps happening is to go to emotioninsound.org to make a contribution. But we're not going away just yet. We have one more wonderful interview for you. The wonderful, chaotic, multicolored specter of the woods and the night and the day and the harp. We're talking to Xerephine. Xerephine, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
This is very exciting. The subject of this particular talk is going to be chaos. So the question as to how to facilitate a talk on chaos is sort of an interesting one. I'm not sure. We'll just, as thoughts occur to you, we'll just have to shout out random words, I think, just in the middle of very coherent sentences. So we'll keep a focus on that. But before we dive...
Predestined. No.
See, exactly. And now it feels chaotic. Galactic. Oh yeah, this is going to work out well. What is that process like when it comes to songwriting for you? Trying to ride that chaotic emotional wave and put it into a place of order or structure?
It's a necessary thing for me when I experience strong emotion around any kind of topic or subject. You know, whether I'm just thinking about, you know, war in the Middle East or famine, or the fact that in 20 years, you know, the sun will nova and the water's going to rise, and, you know, whatever
Surprise.
it is, you know, there's so much information out there. And then you go into all of your whole reality, your whole life, and just so much feeling there for me that when I'm dealing with that, that's where a song comes from. For me, it's always been very intuitive. And so I'll reach for my harp and it's like, how does this feel? And I'm usually crying, and it's like, it just feels like it needs to get out my body as the first, as like a physical thing. And then it needs to like come through my mouth and my fingers. And then if I can align what it feels like with how it's coming out on the instrument, lyrics might come at the same time, they might not. I don't have a really rigid way that I write songs or that I approach music.
You can almost never predict those moments when it's really going to hit you, when that emotion is going to become crystal singing out of you, and you just have to get the hell out of the way and let it kind of come through you. That's an incredibly satisfying process. It's just the best shit. So talk to me about how that process applied to your song that we're going to be listening to in just a few minutes.
Okay. So it developed over the course of some travels. And so it was deeply inspired by a journey to Hawaii, just sitting on the cliffs. And that's how the song starts. And, you know, we would have these like all kinds of different weather and just like this stormy feeling of like the wind blowing through. And that's why I really wanted to talk about the chaos, because the song is really about like kind of wanting to escape, you know.
okay.
And in the chorus, it's like wanting to gather up all of these difficult emotions and just give them to someone who will just take them away on the sails of their boat, like just like the wind, like just the wind blowing through you and just kind of getting battered by the weather. And you know that really visceral feeling of when you're out by the coast and you're getting drenched from the spray, and maybe it's rained and then the sun comes out and the waves are huge and there's people sailing on these stormy seas, and you know, so yeah, it's very oceanic and romantic, and it's kind of like a fantasy, you know. It's like oh, just take me away on the sailboat, and you know, like let's just like throw caution to the wind, and you know, unbind these plans that we're like super bound to, and just let it all go, and you know, just have this big like release. And
it's just exciting to get to go through life that way. Talk to me really quickly about the use of color within this song specifically, since it's titled after
red, yellow,
color.
gold, and green. No. So it's titled Red, Yellow, Gold, and Green. And I think when I was singing that, I was just seeing the colors like a spell, almost flashing. Maybe there was like sunlight flashing in my eye, and I saw like red and yellow and gold, and then I was thinking about the earth or something, or like I saw some grass, and it was just like it's essentially a spell, that part of the song. So it's like red, yellow, gold, and green. By the seasons, come to me. I actually sing bring to me. So it's either come to me or bring to me, you know.
Depending on the chaos of the moment.
Depending on the chaos of the moment. But it's like red, yellow, gold, and green, you know, by the seasons, bring to me or come to me. And it's kind of like casting a spell that's aligning with the cycles of the year and the natural cycles of life, and, you know, sort of a reminder to be grateful and also to work in tandem with the cycles. It feels really good to let go of stuff in the autumn. It feels really good to go inside in the winter. It feels really good to start coming out in the springtime. It feels really good to, you know, as a whole. Yeah. And we go through those cycles monthly.
We do.
And so that's also something to be aware of. So yeah.
Well, that's an invocation to all of those feelings, and to put them all into the same space, you know, and the verses and the choruses sort of interact to explore those. But it's very synesthetic that way, which is you've done a beautiful job with. So thank you for bringing that feeling into that place, and for taking listeners there, because it is a journey. It is chaotic, but in that there is so much beauty. Xerephine, thank you so much.
Thank you.
This has been an excellent chunk of time, and I very, very much appreciate you being so chaotic with us. I think that's turned into something very nice. We now leave you with Red, Yellow, Gold, and Green by Xerephine.